Hello and welcome to Murder Analysed. Thanks for joining me today, and hello to all you all across the world that's been messaging me and stuff. It's been really great, so thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I want to get straight into this case today because it's a really important case. This case is about probably one of Britain's most prolific paedophiles, this new generation of paedophiles that we're seeing now, using online forums to gain access to their victims. Now, this man's victims were between the ages of 4 and 14, and they was across the world. The majority of them were in the UK, Australia and America. So there's many victims out there. Now, this David Wilson, he was called, or he is called, is prolific at what he did to these kids. He was sentenced, I think, on the 10th of February 2021. He pled guilty to all charges, but then you would expect him to do that because the evidence against him in the end was overwhelming. It really was. But as I say, with all these paedophiles, and any perpetrator really, is that they only ever admit to the evidence that they've got against them at the time. They wait for you to show what you've got. He got 25 years anyway, in Ipswich Crown Court, I think on the 10th of February. Could have been the 9th, could have been the 11th, but I think it was the 10th of 2021. So this is a new case. Now, this is a really important case, this, for many reasons. And as we go through this case, you'll see why it's really important to get this case out early about him. He has been promoted and pushed, this case, by governments across the world, actually, including America and Australia, as well as the English government, because there's issues here with this online grooming and how these people now, these new up-and-coming paedophiles, are changing their direction, changing how they work, really, to get a hold of your kids more easily. And it's shocking, really, what this man did. So David Wilson was a 36-year-old male from the United Kingdom, Ipswich, I think, he went to. It doesn't really say much about where he comes from, but I know it was King's Lynn, that sort of way, in the UK. But his crimes were no way just limited to the UK. He was, or he did, posed as a teenager, a little girl, full profile, everything, on Facebook, and then befriended very young children, as young as 4, up to about the ages of 14. His preference, as I've said before, with many paedophiles, they have an age specific. He didn't really have age specific, but his interest was in young boys. He seemed to have a great understanding of how a young child works, on how this online befriending works. We have police officers and certain targeted task force that deal in offences against children, which are trained, highly trained, to seek out these perpetrators online, and they have these made up sites, of young children to attract these perpetrators to their site. Now, what this man had done, I think, he had used that sort of training, or looked at what the police were doing to attract paedophiles, and he reversed it. He then used it, this making up of a whole different characters of these young girls, pictures and stuff of these young girls to attract young children to them sites. And for the first few months, even a year sometimes, he was just a friend. He was on there just like all their other friends as teenagers. All of a sudden, they start to talk. You look great today, because now these kids are comfortable, aren't they, with David Wilson, because they don't know it's David Wilson. They think this is a 12 or 13-year-old girl they're talking to. So then they start talking a little bit about exploring, you know, sexuality. What have you done? In a very childlike way. But then he starts to send them pictures of their breasts or whatever, that young boys, and we're talking about young boys, very young boys, that are being influenced by this man, thinking it's a child, another child. So then they might show little bits of themselves, but then he's got them, hasn't he? And once he's got them, once they send that first image through to him, he's got them. And then he starts to blackmail them. If you don't show me more, or if you don't do this, or if you don't do that, I'm going to put all this out to the world. Your parents are going to see it. Your friends are going to see it. I'll put it to your school. All your school friends are going to see it. So now these kids are not only being sexually abused, using their own hands, being told what to do now by someone on the other end of their phone or on the computer, telling them what to do. And they have to do it because he starts counting down. When they say, no, I'm not doing this, I don't feel comfortable doing this, he changes then. He starts then becoming very nasty, aggressive, overpowering. Well, I'm going to start counting from 10, 9, 8. And by the time I reach 1, if you haven't done what I've told you to do, all them photos of you are going out. These children were traumatised by this. They didn't know what to do. You're talking about some of these as young as 4. Now the 4-year-olds, you couldn't say that they had been psychologically damaged as much as an 11 and 12 and 13 and 14-year-old. But the younger ones, what happened with them is that when he got these boys at that level, in fear of all this coming out to the world, he then started telling them to abuse siblings, to abuse friends, and he would film it. And some did. And I'll tell you now, one of the lads was about 11-year-old that did do things to another child. That boy has already been abused by this man. He's had psychological damage probably for the rest of his life. He is now classed as a sex offender because he did certain acts to this child. He was then removed from his home and put into care because of this. So this man was really, really terrible. Now, not only that, some of these kids were so traumatised, they got depression. They were begging him to stop asking for this stuff. They threatened to kill themselves. And all he said was, see you then. But then he'd come on the next day and want more. This was torture for these kids. Absolute torture. So this is this new generation now of paedophiles that we've got coming on into the scene in a very, very big way, like this. This, when we talk about paedophilia, from in my day, where you had the fear of a child, you know, your next door neighbour, someone you know doing it to them, or family member or whatever, that still happens. But this new generation can target far more children in a quicker time than any paedophile that may be in your local area can do. It's really, really shocking, this case, and I think what's more shocking about it, he'd done it on Facebook. Now Facebook, and when we talk about this, Facebook, they had done actually a tremendous job, and this man, given that, was only caught because of Facebook continued to notice that there was images of young boys being sent out. And they report it, and they report many, and we'll go into how many they report a year of these different things that flag up as being, you know, indecent, and also that flag up as being worrying. Really, there's a lot that Facebook has done. Now, I think since the first referral from Facebook about this man came in, or about the images that were being sent came in, it was 3 years. David Wilson was arrested a couple of times, but it was very difficult to get evidence, because this man used what they call either burner phones, or what we call in England pay-as-you-go phones, or pay-as-you-go SIMs. Very hard to trace. And once he used one, he would then try and get rid of it, and stuff, once he had downloaded or whatever he's going to do with these images. Now, I think when we talk about, and I've said this before about images of children, paedophiles, there's a couple of reasons why they like to have videos and photographs of children. One, because it's their fetish and that's what they love. They will do anything to get to these children. But two, once they put them on the dark web, these photographs and videos make money. This man had so many videos of children and indecent images of children doing things to themselves that he was so prolific at it. This police needed to stop him, and they just couldn't get the evidence because of these burner phones and what they was doing. So it took them 3 years. All right, it took them 3 years, even when he was caught and arrested. And there is a clip, I think, that I'm going to leave a link to, and it's the ITV link of where his arrest took place. I mean, this took so many years to get this man, so much investigation to get this man, even though he wasn't using this end-to-end encryption, which we're going to talk about in a little while. Because if he'd been using end-to-end encryption, he would never have been caught, or it would have took years to catch this man. Now, even though this man was under arrest a few times and was let out on bail while more and more evidence was being brought in, he was still doing this. Hundreds and hundreds of children were still abused by this man online, all over the world. They think around up to 5,000 was abused. Some of these children have been identified, the ones that he was charged with, but many have not. Many have not. And when we talk about children, and we talk about young kids, 11, 12, 10, 9, whatever age they were, they didn't want to come forward because of what they had done. They knew it was wrong, but they couldn't stop it. A lot of them didn't go to their parents. Some did go to their parents, and I think the parents are really good in this. I think this case with this David Wilson, the reason why it's pushed and pushed and pushed, and the reason why it should be pushed and pushed and pushed, is because this is the next generation of paedophiles that's going to abuse our children. Now, when my children were young, all I had to worry about really was who they're hanging around with, you know, are they safe as they're out with their group of friends. They didn't have social media. It wasn't around when my children were teenagers. I actually think it's a real worry now for these teenagers to live in this world that we live in, and it needs to be monitored. We need to make sure that we know what our children are doing and who they're speaking to. Even friends that seem to be friends, these new friends that may have been on friends with them for over a year, because some of these were, with this man pretending to be a teenage girl. There was a relationship drawn. This man took his time. He wasn't rushing anything. And he had thousands of these kids that he was doing this to. Thousands. So I think now we'll go on to this Facebook end-to-end encryption and what damage and the changes that that's going to bring in. So as I said earlier, David Wilson was only caught because of this referral from Facebook. Now you're going to be shocked now with the figures that I'm going to tell you. Now we're talking about Facebook, which is not at present, doesn't use end-to-end encryption. So this site, Facebook site is much more difficult. It's not one of the preferred sites for paedophiles to use, because the encryption won't hide them. They can be found. But even so, it was 15.8 million global referrals were made from Facebook to different agencies about the abuse and sexual abuse and this imagery that was being sent out. 15.8 million referrals on Facebook. Now Facebook, as I said, doesn't use at present end-to-end encryption, and we've spoken a lot of our cases where paedophiles have used WhatsApp and places like that. Now WhatsApp has always used end-to-end encryption, and so it's very difficult if you're using WhatsApp, because WhatsApp was what I think a lot of these other cases use, like I think Sophie Elm used WhatsApp. A lot of people do because of the security of your photos and stuff. They used it for a different reason, to try and hide their self. So it's only then, if your phone has been seized or your computers have been seized, where you have information on there aside from them photos, that you will be it will be much more easier to get a prosecution on you. But Facebook, you see, is changing. They're changing because with every other company in the world, they're evolving. They want this end-to-end encryption to help with privacy. They feel that they need to offer more privacy. Now, there is a conflict here, you know, and I've said this before in other videos that I've done. When we talk about your privacy and the abuse of a child, it's very difficult to weigh up, isn't it? I mean, my scales go like this. But business and everything else, and where Facebook are trying to keep up with all these other sites that are offering more privacy to you. They're not offering privacy when it comes to paedophilias, but the problem is that this is what it's going to do, isn't it? It's going to allow people using Facebook for these terrible crimes more sense of security. It's going to find agencies now which work with children to protect children. It's going to give them, make it so much more difficult to not only just prosecute, but actually to track down these predators online. So I think the pressure from this case and what the government want to put out there, and Australian and American government want to put out there, and also all the papers and everything else, is for this specific reason. If this end-to-end encryption comes in, what are we saying to paedophiles? They're already this new generation using this online forum to attract our children to them. They haven't even got to leave their house. And I think one of the detectives said, if you had a paedophile knock on your door and asked to go up to your child's room, what would you do? You'd be horrified. You'd be ringing the police. There's no difference than what he's doing, what this Wilson did to these children. These were abused in their own home. These were abused over a phone. They abused others. They encouraged them to abuse others. Actually didn't encourage. They blackmailed them to use others as young as 4. They didn't care if these kids were going to kill themselves, because a paedophile only cares about themselves. That's all they care about. These children are just objects to them. That's all they are. They have got no care for your child. So what this case should be doing is making you more aware of the changes coming in, of this new generation of paedophiles coming out that can get to your children 24/7 in their own home, where you think they're safe. And children are children. If they have a girl, a teenager, befriending them, they will accept. Most of them do. And over the months, as this girl has befriended them, hello, how are you? Look at me doing this today, horse riding, this. They think, they believe, don't they? But what they're seeing is the truth. Some adults believe what they're seeing on social media is true. Children are very vulnerable to these predators. These predators are very, very good at making your child feel safe. Until then, they get what they want, and then it all changes. Now, I'm surprised, actually, when I've read through some of this stuff, that some of these children didn't kill themselves. We have a lot of very young children in England taking their own lives for many, many different reasons. But this, luckily, from this, no one did. But they have been scarred, these children, for life. They have been. They've been psychologically damaged for life. So this case does nothing else for you. It's about, really, talking to your children. Because if this end-to-end encryption comes in with Facebook, and most kids are on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, they're on it. That's their world. So what we've got to do as parents and grandparents is evolve with them. Because if we can't catch them now online, if we can't catch them now through referrals from Facebook and everything else, we have to stop them in our own homes. We have to be more on it as parents and grandparents to our kids. Our kids must be told. They must be able to come to you with anything. Now, years ago, I used to say to my kids, if you don't come off that internet, I switch the internet off, to stop them. But then we have phones now, don't we? Your kids are on these phones. My kids, everyone's got them. We've got them. I'm always on the phone. These perpetrators can get to your children anytime they want. Anytime they want. But if our children are more aware of what's going on, they must, I know you're going to say it, most children don't. I remember when my kids were 14, 15, I think one of them grunted at me for about a year as if they're going to listen to us. But they need to listen to somebody. So there's phone numbers on here, and I put other stuff on here for you to contact if you want any information on how maybe to get this information out to your children. There's also information on there if this has happened to any of your children, because once you start talking, maybe something could come out. But this case is this horrible, horrible man, David Wilson. But he's in prison for 25 years. So we've got rid of one. But there's thousands behind him. Thousands. And if this end-to-end encryption goes ahead, the only choice we've got to protect ourselves against these paedophiles is to educate our children and ourselves on the new way of what they are doing. Children shouldn't be naive to this. They really shouldn't. This, I think, I used to do talks on stuff in schools and bits and pieces many years ago. But even now, I think even my discussions now, or lectures that I would do, are now changing on paedophilia and on the offences against children. They're changing. Absolutely. Now, I did cyber law many, many years ago, and we've had certain cases from that already. But I think even now, that's changed. The internet is with us forever. We live in this virtual world. Our children are growing up, living in a virtual world. What they see online isn't always reality. I think if this case shows you anything, it's to try and bring them back down to reality. It's going to be difficult. I don't envy you if you've got very young children and teenage children to try and even talk to them about some of this stuff. But you know, our kids, give them that, are very, very aware. They know. They may not want to talk to you about it, but I think they're talking probably to their friends about it. But you need to make sure. This man targeted young children between 4 and 14 years old. That was the age he liked. Young boys, by portraying himself as this young teenage girl who befriended him. That's all he did. That's all it took, was a profile. And that's a very worrying, isn't it, really, when you think about it, is that's all it took, was a profile and a few pictures put up. He used burner phones so he couldn't be tracked. 3 years, 5,000 images, 5,000 kids out there. 500 been identified, and I think 96 or 54 kids in this country he was charged with 96 offences against him. But there's a lot of kids out there that this man and others like him have damaged, who are not saying anything. So let's explain a little bit more about this end-to-end encryption. So end-to-end encryption is a system of communication where only the communicating user can read the message. In basic terms, the system uses major messaging services such as WhatsApp, which we've said before. It works by encrypting the message from the sender's device, and it sort of essentially it comes up with a digital lock. So there's no way that the police or any of these investigators can unlock that. It's a digital lock, and it makes it very, very difficult, actually impossible. Then it is sent to the intended device, so it's sent to another paedophile, this device. And then again, that has a digital lock on it. So not only wouldn't we have been able to catch David Wilson, we wouldn't have been able to catch anyone related to that. Now I think what comes into this now is when you think about David Wilson's got 25 years, and he won't name who else he dealt with. So let's hope again this Helen's Law comes in, because it comes in for indecent images, doesn't it, and offences against children, Helen's Law. You know, to keep this man in prison for longer, because really he again is another one that shouldn't be given parole at any early date if he doesn't reveal the other victims, because there's many, and also the other perpetrators where he sent on this messages to. So I think all these laws that we have in place, or coming into place, and Helen's Law is in place, should be used. And hopefully 25 years down the line, or I don't know what his minimum was, but it was given 25 years, you know, by that stage, hopefully, that these laws that have been enacted will be enforced, because we need to know who these children are. And to tell you the truth, I don't think this David Wilson really knows how many children he's done this to. He'd made up so many false accounts and had so many phones and stuff. Do you know, I tell you the truth, I don't even think he cared. I don't even think he cared how many there were, who they were, as long as what he was getting from it was from him. And then sending these on and selling these on, these images. I think that's all he really cared about. So, you know, really, I mean, I hope I'm around in 25 years, but I would like to think that I would like to watch this case a little bit more. And this is such a new case, this case. There isn't so much out about this case because it's new. But the important parts are out about this case. The important part is that this man did this to thousands and thousands of children across the world. And this, he was caught only, and it took 3 years to catch this man, and he was only caught because there wasn't this end-to-end encryption on Facebook, and this man still used that site. The worry is now this encryption is coming in onto Facebook. This site will be used by paedophiles. So it is our duty, I think, to make sure that we make ourselves aware of what's going on, because we're the only ones now, really, that can protect our children from this. Really we are. Because the police are trying everything. The governments are trying everything to stop this end-to-end encryption happening. Because Facebook has been such a great site that has maintained keeping this sort of imagery off their sites, this sort of attack against our children away from their site. So, you know, it's up to you really, whether you think that privacy is more important than a child's life and being abused. That comes down to all of us. It's about what choices. If you feel that you don't think that your privacy is more important than the stopping a child, you know, being a child being abused, then make your comments known. Because Facebook, and I think this is what the government are relying on in all these countries that I've mentioned, is that public opinion matters here. It really matters. We all know that companies have to evolve. We all know that. But it's to what end? You know, who loses here really? Who really loses here if we cannot catch people like this man because our privacy is more important? And you know that these paedophiles are going to like rubbing their hands together, aren't they? Really? Really are. No stopping us now. That's what they're thinking. Well, I think we have to take it upon ourselves to really, really educate ourselves and our children about this, or else this is only going to get worse. And I will be doing more and more cases on this as years go on, because it's about to get really bad. So I've said this is the new generation of paedophiles coming up. It is. But then I hear today, and someone commented to me, and thank you so much for your comments, I appreciate that, about this new term that paedophiles want to be called. You know, they don't like the name paedophile or pedo or nonce, what they've been known for years. But paedophile comes from Latin name. So peda, which means child, and the philia, which means love or friendly. So paedophile or pedophile, as it's pronounced, means that. So that's exactly what they are. But they want to now, again, you know, rebrand themselves. They don't like that name, do they? Paedophile or pedophile. So I think, what is it they've called now? MAP. They want to be called MAP. And I think it's minor attracted person. So this is about paedophiles that want to be known by this name because they don't want to be known as offenders of paedophiles. They just like to see these pictures. And I've said before about these pictures, haven't I? These pictures are not cartoons. They're not made up. These are cartoons of real children of all ages, including babies, being sexually abused, being raped by paedophiles. But these don't want to be known as that. They just want to be known as this, you know, affectionate people that just want to have, as usual, the minimum age dropped. They want to, you know, wiggle their way in like they tried to do in the 80s to, you know, rebrand themselves, you know, with different agencies and different staff and different, you know, platforms that are out there that they want to try and get on the bandwagon with their ideas. And this new minors attracted person, now when you even say the word minor in anything, really, when you're talking about an older men or women that are pedophiles, you know, minor, using the word minor, they couldn't even get that out of it. So I don't know where this new terms come from. But what I do know is they are rebranding. They really are trying to rebrand. We've got this new generation of paedophiles, and I think this just shows you this new brand of paedophiles trying to infiltrate into certain organisations and certain charitable organisations to become part of normality. Well, they will never become part of normality because people know exactly what they are. They've tried that in the 80s and it didn't work. Actually, it backfired in a very, very big way. I think as people, as communities, as societies, we are much more aware of what's going on out there. We can see between the lines when people try to rebrand their self and try and distinguish their self away from what they call a proper paedophile. We're not the same. No, you are. You are the same. Because whether you are physically attacking that child, whether like David Wilson, you have hurt that child to such a degree, psychologically and physically, and making them themselves become the perpetrators themselves, the damage that these people cause, just because they may watch a video and not partake in it. What does that make them any better than the people doing the act? Okay, you may think because you're only selling indecent images of children or videos of children online that you're not a pedophile. Yes, you are. So you can rebrand, you can rename, you can change how you abuse our children, but you're all still paedophiles, and that's all you're ever going to be. So just be very careful, I think, out there when we see these things. And, you know, we live in a world now that some people think this is acceptable, to rebrand their self, to back away from, oh, the paedophile word. No, I think we have to be much, much more aware of what's really going on out there. And we shouldn't give these people 1 inch, not 1 inch, not even enough time. None of these agencies or anyone that they're trying to infiltrate should believe anything these people are saying. These people are paedophiles and that's all there is to it. They're never going to change. So this case, yes, it's been emotional. Yes, it's a shocking case. But if nothing else, all I want from you to do is really be aware of what's going on. Think about the changes now that's coming in and how you can yourself protect your own children, because really in the end that's the only protection they're ever going to get, really. And if we do it right, that may be the only protection they need is from you. So you know what to do. I hope you found this case interesting. I know I'm going to have lots of comments on it and I love them, so thank you for that. So you can subscribe anytime you'd like. You can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. So thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.